Good morning students and welcome back. In today's lecture, I'm going to take you through the risk management process for an individual. And once again, I'm not talking about all the kinds of risks that we face in our day-to-day lives, but I will be concentrating on financial risks. Through this presentation, I will show you how the risk management concepts in an enterprise view can directly be applied to the risk management process for an individual. The concept of risk management is very relevant to individuals. Although many large entities formally practice risk management, most individuals practice it more informally, and some even practice it quite haphazardly, often responding to risk events after they have occurred. Although many individuals do take precautions against unwanted risks, these are mostly precautions taken against the most obvious risks, like mistakenly swallowing poison or getting electrocuted. The more subtle risks are often ignored. Many individuals simply do not view the risk management process as a formal, systematic process that would help them achieve not only their financial goals, but also the ultimate end result of happiness or maximum utility, as any economist would call it. But the individual should consider this as a very important process in their lives. Although an individual neither has the resources nor the organizational overheads of a large business, the importance of risk management does not get diminished, and the risk management framework still applies, though most likely in a scaled down form. Though nearly all of the essential elements of a formal risk management process are still applicable to individuals, they can reduce the recipe to 5 essential ingredients, consistent with the reduced scope of the risk management exposure of an individual. The first step for an individual is much like the step for an enterprise, which is the determination of goals and objectives. This step would include most of the elements associated with risk governance, just without all the organizational complexity. The next functional step involves choosing the investments and identifying the risks associated with each investment. Lacking any risk infrastructure, the individual at this stage may have already hired some help in the form of an investment advisor. So this step and subsequent steps will probably be executed by the advisor, although the individual still needs to remain knowledgeable and involved at every stage. In the context of enterprise risk management framework, the individual is really the risk governance committee or the board, and the advisor is the management that executes their decisions. The next step for an individual are at the heart of the risk management process, which is risk monitoring, risk mitigation, and management. The individual needs to first evaluate their risk exposure, that is, how much is the risk tolerance limit, how much risk can they take. Then consider the various alternative approaches to modify the risks as necessary, whether they need to absorb the risk, transfer the risk, or shift the risk, followed by implementing the risk management solution, that is either taking insurance or buying derivatives or hedging. The final functional step for an individual's risk management process would be evaluation and review. This process may occur less frequently for an individual, but it is nevertheless very important. Each individual should simplify the risk management process as necessary, so that they do not end up considering it too complicated to worry about, and thus ignoring risk management altogether. The potential costs of avoiding risk management for an individual are essentially very similar to that of a big organization, although perhaps with less money involved. For individuals, the adoption of risk culture should result in self-awareness. This awareness will make them knowledgeable about the various kinds of risks, their rewards, their costs, their interconnected relations, and the method of aligning these risks with the kind of reward that you're expecting out of those risks. This awareness should also result in better investment returns or a better risk-return trade-off. That means you will be able to earn better returns for the same amount of risk taken. The enterprise view of risk management is equally applicable to an individual, even though the term enterprise usually does not relate to an individual in any way. The appropriate set of risks for an individual must not be viewed in isolation, but in the consideration of the goals and objectives of an individual in a holistic view. For example, an advisor may design an investment portfolio for an individual to make sure that it is well balanced, diversified, and optimizes the risk-return trade-off at some perceived comfortable level of risk. But for the client, whose wealth does not just consist of the financial resources but also of human capital, has to still think whether the investment advisor has taken a holistic approach and considered his entire wealth. Take for example a client who's working in a real estate field. Now, investment in real estate would be very good for any other client's portfolio. However, if this client's portfolio is invested in real estate, then his entire wealth, not just his human capital, but also his savings are invested in real estates. So if the real estate market was to go into depression, then this person may lose his job and may also lose value of his investments. Also, various individuals would have different requirements, and therefore one portfolio suits all approach does not apply to all. In another example, say you have three investors, investor A, investor B, and investor C. Investor A is in a job which will give him an inflation-adjusted retirement benefit when he retires. Investor B is also in a pensionable job, but his pension will not be inflation adjusted. It will be a fixed amount of money. Likewise, investor C is in a job which does not provide any pension at all. So his retirement will completely depend upon his own savings and investments. Now, these three investors will require totally different investment solutions, not only to deal with inflation, but also to deal with the uncertainty revolving around the lifespans of investors. In fact, because of the extremely variable life cycles of individuals and the discrete nature of many individual goals, the enterprise view is really more important for an individual than it may be for an institution. The risk tolerance decision for an individual is also similar to, though not identical to, that of an enterprise. As per the traditional finance theory, individuals usually work towards maximizing their utility, whereas the businesses usually maximize a concrete observable value such as the equity of the company or its total market capitalization. Although individuals face life and a certain death on an uncertain timetable, most businesses usually tend to be very short-lived entity, but with the expectation of immortality. Therefore, the decision of risk tolerance from these two very different viewpoints is going to differ. For example, the risk tolerance decision of an enterprise considers it to be a going concern, an entity which is going to continue forever. However, the decision of risk tolerance for an individual is the one which is a little harder to make. Some individuals may also go through the process of identifying risk tolerance and risk budgeting with the assistance of an investment advisor, but many do not execute it well or carry it far enough. A classical example of this failure is the tendency of several individuals to invest their portfolios with their employers. As a result, the risk budget of their total wealth, their financial wealth as well as human capital, is completely invested in one industry, if not in just one company. So diversify, people, diversify while you have the time. Individuals can also face a large number of risks of operational nature. These include hackers breaking into one's computer and the risk of robbery or theft. In recent years, one of the most commonly cited risks for individuals is identity theft. For individuals, however, we would consider their non-financial risks to be considered with their lifespan and their health, as well as other life-changing events. Obviously, the health of an individual is a very important risk. This risk can result in direct healthcare expenses, reduced income, or disability. People vary widely with the risk management strategies that they undertake to control their health, such as their choices in diet, exercise, preventive healthcare, and avoidance of undue health risk. Some individuals address only the financial aspect of the health risk, while others do not consider this to be a risk at all till the time a situation arises in which they realize that they should have allocated some funds towards this risk. Closely related to the health risk is mortality risk, that is the risk of dying relatively young. And there is also longevity risk, that is a risk of outliving your financial resources. Not only are these risks a primary determinant of the quality of life, they are also critical factors in financial planning. No one wants to outlive their money. But with an increasingly aging population and good health care, this concern is becoming greater by the day. Individuals also face another form of non-financial risk, and that is the risk of being defrauded by their financial advisor. Whether an advisor simply charges too much for the services provided, or steals small amounts of money from their investors, or engages in a massive Ponzi scheme, individuals may face a high risk of loss from their advisors. However, one can circumvent all these risks by paying more attention and remaining aware of all of their investments and the associated risks. There can be various risk interactions for individuals too. Suppose an individual works for a publicly traded company and through the incentive program regularly receives employee stock options. Companies may require that employees hold on to these options for some fixed period of time, which is usually called the vesting period. However, employees continue to hold on to those equities even in the long run, not realizing that both their financial wealth and their human capital is both invested in the same company. So they are really not as well diversified as they should be. Just as with the case of a company or an enterprise, individuals also actively use the risk modification methods as mentioned for an enterprise to modify and mitigate their risks. I always advise my investors to keep a portion of their income aside for difficult times. It is usually a 6 months salary or your 6 months expenses, however you may like it. So that should be kept aside for difficult times, and this is what is an example of risk acceptance through self-assurance. Then of course there is also risk prevention and avoidance. We see that people do not leave their jobs before they get a new job. What is that? That is also an example of risk avoidance. Same way, people do not invest their hard-earned money where it is obvious that they may be investing in a Ponzi scheme. Well, I may be wrong at that because there are many people who do. Then there is risk transfer and risk shifting. We all have experience of risk transfer because we all take insurance. We take health insurance, we take car insurance and life insurance and so many other insurances. I travel a lot, so I also take travel insurance. So that is an example of risk transfer, whereby we are transferring our risk to a third party who is the insurer. And finally, risk shifting. Many individuals trade in derivatives, and that is a way of risk shifting. Well, that is about it. I really hope that you enjoyed this presentation and learned something from it. There is a lot to take home with you, so I would appreciate if you all start working diligently on your risk management process. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to write back to me. If you would like to know more about derivatives or portfolio management, then I would advise you to take the courses for derivatives or portfolio management. Thank you very much once again.